Hi, I'm Dr. Mel Lurie. I'm a physician specializing in psychiatry. Many of you know me by now. People have wondered how this thing called the unconscious works, the unconscious mind. Well, I've put together a little video for you. I hope it does explain it to you. It's called How the Unconscious Works. Let's take a look. So now let's talk about the mind, and we'll concentrate on the unconscious and other elements of consciousness. We'll start off with a more psychological, biological approach, and then we'll start to see some of the implications this has for politics. So let's start off with the mind, which is also called the psyche. That's the Greek word for mind. Remember, that's where thoughts and feelings are and where we plan and decide things. So let's draw a line, and that will separate awareness, or consciousness, that is that which we are aware of, and unawareness or unconsciousness. This part of the mind does influence us. It influences our decisions, our planning, but we're unaware of how it does. So it has more power than it would if what's contained in it in terms of memories, values, thoughts, and feelings were actually conscious and could be changed by our adult mind. But we're talking about the unawareness, what's deep in our mind and came from the time we were toddlers, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. We don't remember it. We didn't even know language at the time lots of it was formed, so it's not very precise. In any case, in the conscious mind, there's rational thought. That's one of the things, one of the functions that makes up the rational mind or the conscious mind. And there are also emotions. We've talked about this before. There are also emotions in the unconscious mind, emotions we're unaware of. Sometimes they're tapped. Sometimes they have a lot to do with the path we take through life, and this will be discussed in a later video, the one on stress and coping. Also in the unconscious is irrational thought. Once again, these thoughts, or this psychic or mind content of emotions, memories, values, whatever, that were formed when we were little, are generally handled in an irrational way because they were formed when we were little. So we have the conscious mind, and we have emotions and thoughts in the conscious mind. Here we have the unconscious mind, and I made that a big bubble. Not because what's in there is really that important once it becomes conscious and we can understand it as an adult, but it remains unconscious, and so we can't really see it coming. We don't know what's going on there, and we can't use rational thought to counter it or to change it somewhat, depending on a situation. It's relatively fixed. Let's talk about preconscious thought and feelings. You know, one of the things that happens when a person comes into the psychiatrist's office is that the person is terribly upset, feels all alone, has no idea of how to solve his or her problems. And the psychiatrist has a framework. The psychiatrist sees things and places them into a framework, and a lot of this is included in these slides. Already that's quieting for the patient, because here's someone who understands what he or she is going through. In any case, in the process of traditional psychotherapy, the psychiatrist comes to understand, or think he has an understanding, of what's going on with the person, what's been unconscious and influencing the person in a negative way, and what's finally getting to the point of almost being there, just preconscious, it's called. Just like with this talk, the psychiatrist mentions his interpretation. It was your mother. If the person already knew it was his mother, then this wouldn't really matter. He'd wonder what the heck he was coming to a psychiatrist for. Of course, I knew it was my mother the whole time. What are you telling me? On the other hand, sometimes what the psychiatrist sees and believes is happening is still not quite in the preconscious. It's still a little too much unconscious. And when the psychiatrist makes the interpretation, it was your mother, that goes over like a lead balloon. As in, I don't know, nah, I don't think so. But when the psychiatrist's timing is just right, and he makes an interpretation of a thought or feeling that's right in the preconscious, right ready to be made conscious with a little help, the individual confirms it and learns something. The psychiatrist might say, yes, and that was what your mother would do. And then the individual will say something like, my God, yes, and my mother would do this when I wanted to go out, and then my father would say that, and my big brother would say that, and before you knew it, I'd be stuck. Yes, and that's how I'm stuck in life right now. You see, the individual confirms the interpretation, sees its relevance, its logic in his own life. And this is what happens when really any teacher teaches a new concept, and this is what will happen in this audience. That is, some of the things I say will go over like a lead balloon. Other things will be so obvious you wonder why you're listening. But then there'll be some things, and it'll be different for each person, that will really hit the spot. And you'll learn, and you'll see the connections, and you'll be able to connect a lot of the dots that are hidden in plain sight, not just in your life, but in the political life that you live. Now let's look at something else that's very important in terms of politics. And this has to do with suppressed emotions or thoughts. So what are these? Suppressed emotions or thought are drawn in the conscious area of the mind. We're aware of them. But these are emotions or thoughts we're really not exactly allowed to express. They get buried, they get stuck in us. We can't express those emotions because, well, it's politically incorrect. If it's a political emotion or thought, people who live in dictatorships can't express a lot of thoughts. They have to suppress a lot of their thoughts and their emotions toward their regime. In our everyday lives, this happens, of course, all the time. Now, let's take a look at some political examples of how all this works when we're talking about the unconscious, the preconscious, the suppressed, and then the conscious thoughts that are there when we might discuss politics with someone or listen to it in the media. Ann Romney made a comment. Now, she probably developed it intuitively, but it was a comment that really struck a nerve in women. And that comment touched the unconscious and really the biology of women, the unconscious, the preconscious, the suppressed, and the conscious. And what did she say? She said, Mitt is always there when you need him. Mitt is always there when you need him. You know, after that, the losses that Republicans had taken in the polls in terms of women started to turn around. And the reason is, in the biological realm, the role of woman is to bear the child. And at the biological moment of truth, that woman can only attend to the child. That woman has to depend on a man's being there when she needs him. Now, this is played out in our everyday lives. If you have a first date, well, the woman doesn't necessarily want to commit herself to anything unless she knows you're going to be there again and again. This derives from the biology of women, because if women constantly would take up with men who would not be loyal or would not be interested in the relationship or not be interested in the children that they would bear, then those children wouldn't have a good break, very likely would not do well in life, and the reproductive cycle that I talked about before wouldn't happen. That is, the genes in those women wouldn't be reproduced because they wouldn't have successful children or any children or healthy children who would live long enough to reproduce. Part of what a woman has to do in life is choose a man that she can have a successful mating with and that she can have offspring with. Ann Romney described Mitt Romney as that man. He is there when you need him. Once again, she probably did this very intuitively, but with this kind of a model, she or the Obama side, or any politician really, can pick aspects of a campaign that fit into this model and really connect much more readily with the political audience. Now let's take a look at something that happened with respect to suppressed emotions and thoughts. This occurred in the Republican primary early in 2012. There was a debate, and prior to that debate, Newt Gingrich, who was still quite popular, was said to have had affairs, and there was some kind of controversy going along with him. Well, when the debate came, the first question out of the moderator's mouth was about this scandal. Now, Newt Gingrich countered this. Newt Gingrich scolded the moderator for asking such a question in a presidential debate. That is, a question about one's personal life, about scandal, when in a presidential debate he was inferring matters of national and international concern should be primary. Well, what happened was that at that time, the audience in South Carolina, the Republican audience, certainly did not like the traditional press, but most of those feelings and thoughts, not all of them, but most of them, were suppressed. They really couldn't express them very well. But when Newt Gingrich scolded the representative, the moderator, the representative of the traditional press, that audience was able to unleash all of this suppressed emotion. They loved it. They loved him. It felt great. They'd had it bottled up for so long that it felt great to express that emotion. And this was a home run that Newt Gingrich hit. Whether he did it purposefully or accidentally is unclear, but he went on to win that primary. So now I'm starting to give you examples of how you can use this model of what goes on in the conscious and unconscious worlds, and the continuum between the biological, the unconscious, the preconscious, and then the suppressed and conscious emotions, because this is what allows a successful politician, who usually does it intuitively, to connect with the voters. Well, I hope this video has given you a fair idea of how the unconscious works and how it works in politics. The next video in the series is called The Two Essentials of Life. You can find it on this site.